Good evening everyone, welcome back to my channel True Crime with Jess Rose. How you all doing? Happy New Year to you all. Hope you've had a lovely Christmas. And I don't know what it's been like but where you are in the world, but ours has been pretty pants. We couldn't go out, couldn't really spend any time with any family. New Year again, everyone was in, and now as of Monday we're on a national lockdown again, so schools are closed. Yeah, here we are again, but we haven't got the summer this time to kind of get us through. So yeah, it's all a bit surreal at the minute, but I am back with you after the Christmas break, and tonight my first story back is the Matthew Shepard story. Now this one I actually watched, I think it was on True Movies, a film on this. You know, it's based on, it's recreated, you know, on True Movies. And I watched it with my sister. Oh, I'm going back now, well over 10 years ago I watched it. And it was heartbreaking, a heartbreaking story, and obviously to know it was true as well. So it always played on my mind, this one. And then the other day, looking through some stories for you, I came across it again, and there was kind of a special done on Netflix. To be honest, there is that many books, stories, films being done on Matthew. I couldn't even tell you the name of the one I watched all them years ago. I couldn't tell you. But if you don't know his story, I'm going to share it with you. Now, Matthew Shepard was born on the 1st of December 1976. And he was born in Casper, Wyoming. His parents were Judy and Dennis Shepard, and he has a younger brother called Logan. Now, Matthew, so cute. Such a cutie. You know, you see him from when he was younger, really angelic looking. Very petite, like small framed boy, just so cute. And sometimes throughout his school life, that could get him teased. Sometimes he doesn't actually say he was bullied, so if he was, I haven't came across that, but it just says that, you know, he could be teased sometimes because of his small frame. So he was quite, you know, he wasn't mega outgoing, but apparently he was just friend to everyone. He was just a really sweet lad. Now, like I say, he didn't play sports or anything at school, but he showed a real interest from early on in politics. So in 1994, so Matthew would have been 17, 18. The family moved to Saudi, where his dad had got a new job and stuff. Now, it said that the family were quite an affluent family, middle class. I'm not sure what class is middle class, but I'd say, you know, they were comfortable. And like I say, they left to go to Saudi. But Matthew obviously still studying. He goes to an American school in Switzerland, and he graduated in 1995. So Matthew then become a political science major at the University of Wyoming. So that brings you, you know, right up. Now also in 1995, Matthew, he was away in Morocco. And it was about this time Matthew, you know, he'd come out, he'd been struggling with his sexuality. And, you know, I'm tracing back to the film that I watched. He had actually come out as gay at this point. And his dad does talk about on the documentary I watched. Apparently, Matthew had come to his dad and said, you know, I've got to talk to you about something. And, you know, his dad said he didn't know what Matthew was expecting of him. But when Matthew came out to him, he was just like, I love you, you're my son. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, and he was quite surprised at how hesitant Matthew was to tell, you know, that his sexuality and, you know, come out to his family. He was quite surprised at how hesitant he was. I suppose Matthew just didn't No, people can react differently. You know, people you've known all your life, you know, could react differently. So, you know, but his mum and dad were, you know, it didn't matter to them. He was still Matthew. It made no difference to how they felt about him. They seemed like a really lovely couple, really lovely parents. Now, like I said, in 1995, Matthew goes on a trip to Morocco, and again, in the film that I watched, you do see this part. So he plays quite a, well, he would play a very important part of his, how his character went from them, because Matthew was beaten and gang raped while he was in Morocco. Now, in the film, it's by, I think it's about 4 or 5 blokes. It doesn't go into it much. So, because he was on his own when this happened, it was just, you know, second person evidence on that. But it broke him. It did. And overnight from that happening, which it would cripple anybody, cripple us all, you know, he changed and he just became a shell of his former self. A friend close to Matthew said he was beginning to, you know, suffer with severe depression after this happening. He'd had panic attacks. He'd become very introverted. He was hospitalised on more than one occasion for suicidal thoughts. Now, nothing's been said of him actually attempting to commit suicide, but it does say that he did have, and they've got to have been very serious to have been hospitalised through them as well. So, you know, it really affected Matthew. It really did. And have you seen this boy? You know, when the story's finished, have a look. Matthew Shepard, and it's Shepard. There's not 2 H's in it. And he's tiny. He's tiny. You know, I think he was 5'2", 150 pounds. I don't know how, I know American it's pounds, isn't it? We're stone here, so. But he was tiny. He was such a tiny little boy, and you know, to think of something like that happening to him, you just think, you rotten blokes, whoever you are. And obviously, them blokes have never, no justice ever came from that. So during that period of time, like I say, he was still going to uni, but he was very nervous. You know, he'd obviously come back to America when he started uni in Wyoming, and his family was still in Saudi, so he was living on his own. And you know, in the programs that I've watched, you know, it showed him just on his bed, just curled into himself. It was just, I think it was a really, really dark time. Now he started to come out of himself. The only problem is it was said that Matthew had started dabbling in recreational drugs. So he'd go out more. But I suppose after experiencing something like that and not getting counselling, not getting help afterwards to talk through it with somebody, you know, that's what he's turned to. Other people turn to alcohol. You know, there's so many things that would be turned to if you wasn't able to talk it through. And like I say, it said that he had turned to drugs, but he was getting on with life. He was getting on with it. Now we get to October the 6th, 1998. And Matthew was at the Fireside Lounge in Laramie. And while he was there, he was approached by 2 lads, one called Aaron McKinney and another one, Russell Henderson. And in the film, it shows these 2 approaching him. I keep going back to the film because it is based on those true events. So I've read it as well as watching the film. I've gone to a lot of sources about this story, and I'll explain why as it goes on. But it shows that Matthew had gone to the pub on his own. He did spend a lot of time on his own, and he had friends. He found like the gay community within that area, but he was still very nervous. So he was at this pub on his own, and like I say, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson come in, and they edged their way over to him along the bar. You know, like in America, you've got them bars and people sit at the bars. You know, we have got them here, but they're more, they're massive in America. They're massive long bars. And it shows them edging their way along the bar. And, you know, they start talking to him, and, you know, in the film they say, you know, that they don't like gays very much around it. Basically, befriending Matthew and coming across like they were also gay, and that he'd kind of found to, you know, it come across that way. Now, this is how they managed to get Matthew to leave with them, and they offered him a lift home. Obviously, he thought he was okay. He thought he was safe with them. And when they get in the van, and this is what I'm saying about here now, there's a lot of different sources I've looked at this. Some say one thing, some say another. In this point, the majority of them do say that Matthew put his hand on Aaron's leg. Now, don't forget, they've put across that they are gay and that they are, you know, want to befriend him, and they act all outgoing and they're all really friendly, and, you know, so he wouldn't have thought anything of doing that. And it was said that it triggered something in Aaron, and he starts brutally beating Matthew in the truck. Russell's obviously got to have been driving. Now, what it actually was, what the reason for getting Matthew to come to the truck, they were going to rob him. They wanted to rob him. And, you know, when he touched Aaron's leg, apparently a switch went off. There's a lot of questions over this, so bear with me. And, like I say, started beating Matthew. It's just so sad because it's just... they go down a rural road, and I've seen it quite a few times. It's like a kind of a crossroad, and on kind of the right hand side there's like a field, and towards like the end of the field, so not far off the road really. Don't forget it was early hours, but there's like it's like a fence. It said barbed wire. Now, any of the pictures I've seen it looked more just wood. But they beat Matthew brutally. Like I say, pistol whip him. They torture him. They've obviously already robbed him. They've took his card. His shoe came off in the truck. And then they tie him to this fence that I was telling you about, and they leave him there to die. Leave him there. It's like minus degree weather. Don't forget it's October. It's freezing, and they just leave him. Now, when Aaron and Russell left Matthew to die, it was said that they left to go. They knew his address. Presume they must have got it out of him or found some sort of identification, but they knew his address and they were going to rob his home. And somehow or another, the bullies that they are, they've come across two Latino lads, and a fight starts, but it's a 2-on-2 this time. You know, and they don't come out as well out of that. And the police are called. So when the police get there, I believe it's McKinney's quite his head to her and one of the other lads. And the police obviously get them all. And the policeman who pulls over and stops this fight and everything else, he does spot that there's a credit card on the dash of the truck, and there's also a shoe, like a random shoe there. He clocks it and doesn't clock it at the same time. It kind of wasn't relevant to what he was looking at, but it was something that he remembered. So he didn't actually realise how important that was at the time. So that's happened, and they let I think McKinney goes to the hospital, and they let Aaron McKinney. So they let Aaron go to the hospital, and Russell goes home. Now, when they both get back, they get their girlfriends like to wash their clothes and stuff, so covering up what had happened. Back to Matthew, who's still tied to this fence while all of this is going on. It actually took 18 hours for anyone to find him. It said that by this point he hadn't gone into a coma. And it was a cyclist that found him at first. And he said, the cyclist had said, I think it says a cyclist, but I'm sure, I mean, although it was a cyclist, I'm sure it was like a young lad who found him. He said he thought he was a scarecrow at first, because like I say, he's on like a fence. And then goes a bit closer, realises. And when the police got there, the policewoman first got there, you see her in a lot of interviews. Always tears up as she's talking about it, because she says as she walked over, she realised that Matthew was still breathing. But his whole face was completely covered in blood, obviously from the amount of blows he'd had to the head and stuff. But there was bits cleared on his face of blood where the tears had been coming down. So it like cleaned his face with tears. It's just, you see her fill up as she's talking about it. I mean, the last documentary I watched, it's like 20 years later, and she still gets so emotional. And you can imagine you would, because the second you'd start talking about it, it'd bring you straight back to that moment in time. So you can understand that. So Matthew was took to the hospital, barely still alive, just hanging on. He'd suffered fractures to the back of his head, severe brain stem damage. It obviously severely beaten. He had lacerations around his head, his face, his neck. And at this point, it had actually got out to Matthew's friends what happened. It's a very small town. It was heard about very quickly. His parents had been let know that, you need to get back. So a lot happened very quickly, and there was like candlelight vigils being held, not only there, not only around America, it's said around the world. This boy just had such an effect on everyone who heard about it. And like I say, if you look at him, you'll see kind of why everyone's protective nature came out when they heard about it, because he was so tiny. But Matthew, unfortunately, was pronounced dead 6 days later on the 12th of October 1998. Where the brainstem had been damaged, which regulated body temperature. I think it regulated a lot. He just wasn't coming back from it. People have said that when they went to see him, he was unrecognisable. Oh, it's just what this poor, not just then, I mean, the rape in Morocco, and just, he had everything to live for. He was so bright, such a friendly boy, and then just this tragic, sinister, group of events that led to this. It's just heartbreaking. Now, Aaron and Russell were initially arrested and charged with attempted murder. Oh, sorry. Got ahead of myself there. When this was phoned in, and obviously it became apparent what had happened, The police woman who'd found Matthew, obviously there was a policeman who'd stopped the Aaron and Russell fighting at earlier on. Don't forget he'd seen the credit card, Matthew's credit card, and a shoe. So at the police station, when it was all being discussed, it said that Matthew didn't have anything on him, things had been taken, and he only had one shoe on him. Of course, the police officer's ears had pricked up, and he said, what was his name? He goes, Matthew Shepard. And that was the name that was on the credit card. So, of course, 2 and 2 together came together very, very quickly in this case. So, Aaron and Russell were initially arrested and charged with attempted murder, kidnapping and aggravated robbery. But when Matthew died 6 days later, the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder, which made both defendants eligible for the death penalty. Now, what Aaron said in his interview was that they planned to rob Matthew. That had been the plan at the very beginning. They pretended to be gay to kind of get him to go in the van with them. And then it was said that when Matthew obviously put his hand on Aaron's leg, it switched him, and he admitted he started beating him. He admitted everything was admitted to. They didn't try and lie. But this is where the questions start to come up now, because literally straight away it was said that this was because Matthew was gay. It was a hate crime. They'd gone after him because he was gay. That's why they'd hurt him. That's why they'd killed him, essentially. And of course, quite rightly, there was uproar worldwide over it. Now, Aaron's solicitor, their girlfriends, not exactly credible sources, these people. But again, really, they said that it had nothing to do with that. It wasn't that Matthew was gay. It was they wanted to rob him. That's why they got his address, because they wanted to rob his house. But there's been a book written in 2013 about it, and the author, who's, he's got quite a bit of backlash over it. He came across with the same finding. It wasn't a hate crime in the sense, it wasn't because Matthew was gay. It was a horrific murder, but it was for robbery purposes, not because of what his sexuality was. And it was said that one of the boys was possibly, gay themselves, and a lot of the, and he faced a massive backlash for this. And part of me, either way, I can understand. I understand 100% why, and what came out of this, because there was a hate crime bill passed. But me, I'm not. They should get the death penalty anyway. It doesn't matter. What they did was so disgusting, was so heinous, that their reasons for it, not that it doesn't matter. I know what I'm trying to say. I'm just, I'm trying to put across that how dare they do that to that boy? For whatever reason, they justified in their own heads. One reason's not worse than the other one, because they're both, neither one of them warrant anything that happened to him. So trying to say that it wasn't because he was gay, it was because they wanted to rob him. Oh, well, that's okay then. That's okay. As long as it wasn't because he was gay then. What response is being expected from that? What, we're supposed to look at them a little bit better? you know, that it might not be because he was gay. You know, I've struggled with, I'm struggling in explaining what I mean, and I'm hopefully not offending anybody with what I mean, because I don't think any reason, you know, what reason can you give? And the fact that someone has stepped in and gone, hold up, it wasn't because he was gay after all, you know, 15 years later. It was because they just wanted to rob him. Oh, okay then. Silly us. You know, I just find it mind-boggling. So, look what they did. So, on April the 5th, 1999, before I get too carried away, Russell pleaded guilty to murder and kidnapping in order to avoid the death penalty. His sentence was 2 consecutive life sentences. And then in October/November of 99, Aaron, who, you know, didn't plead guilty, put everyone through a trial, but was found guilty of murder, and obviously kidnapping. His sentence was also 2 consecutive life sentences. And it's just, even now, apparently, I'm not actually sure which one of them it is, because I have watched so many on it, and, you know, he's very, I think it's Russell Henderson, very, you know, contrite about the whole thing, and, you know, it wasn't because he was gay, honestly. So, what do you want? A pat on the back? Is that what you want? I don't understand, like, what you did to that boy for whatever reason you thought of in your head. You know, I think the fact that I suppose because gay men, lesbian women, I suppose because they have, you know, had the worst time in, you know, in the West, all over the world. I suppose it was just seen as more heinous. That was why. But to me, it's all, that's disgusting. Oh, I'm struggling to get the words across, because I don't want anything coming across like I'm being thoughtless, you know, or haven't thought this through properly. I know what I mean. I'm saying that this boy had everything to live for. And regardless of what reason they give, there is no reason. So the fact that, you know, someone all these years later is coming back and saying, no, I think you got that wrong. What are you trying to prove? What are you doing? You know, you all got that a little bit wrong. Just stop it. So when the court case was going on, and it is beautiful, and it was beautiful what I've seen, you see it in the film, and I've seen not live footage of it, but obviously news footage of it from the time. Outside the court, quite disgustingly, there was a lot of anti-gay protesting going on. Obviously protesting against these 2 boys being found guilty. You know, just hateful people, really. Were outside. Don't forget, Matthew's family's in there. They've had to cope with what happened. Then they've had to hear that this is because their son was gay. You know, then they've got all these hate-filled people outside, on mics, you know, discussing how bad this life is, and, you know, that homosexuality is you know, a sin and everything else. So Matthew's friends, actually, they built these kind of angel wings, huge angel wings. Oh, it's amazing. And kind of put a block in the walkway to the court, so Matthew's family could walk through safely without having to look at these people behind who call themselves religious. You know, and it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful way, and it was just like, it showed what a beautiful person Matthew was, that kind of support come through. Now, the Matthew Shepard Foundation was founded December of 98. And the hate crime law was signed in by President Obama on the 29th of October 2009. So, it took 10 years. But this was signed, and it was taken all the way by not only Matthew's parents, but by James Byrd Jr.'s parents. His mum, I've seen his mum. I don't know if it's dad, but I did see James's mum. Again, another hateful story that's in the documentary. And they joined together, to get this law passed. And what it means is that if it's proven that a crime is, it's proved that it was because of a person's, whether it's their sexual orientation, whether it's their race, nationality, if it's the fact that it's a minority and it's because of that, not just a minority, if it's a race thing, any reason, just a hateful reason to go after somebody, that in itself is a law. So it means that rather than, just getting life in prison, prosecutors can go for the death penalty. Based on that, it ups the charge, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And what it's actually called is the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crime Prevention Act. And I just thought, how amazing. I say it about these parents all the time, that, to go through what's possibly the worst thing anyone could go through, to lose your child in such horrific circumstances, and then to find out it was just for them simply being themselves, just who they are. I can't imagine how that would feel, how you'd cope with that, and the fact that they've been strong enough to fight this all the way through. I'm not sure how it works in America, but I think is it the Senate and then Congress, then it gets a federal law. I'm not 100%, but I know it has to go all the way up, state law, then federal law. I just think how amazing are those parents not to just go into a hole. I've said it before, I'd just go into a hole. I wouldn't want to see it. I don't know what I'd do. I don't know, So, yeah, that was the Matthew Shepard story. It's such a sad one, and I think it's had me tongue-tied a lot, this one, because I just wanted to make sure what I was saying made sense. I'm not saying that, that them saying he was killed because he was gay. My point is the fact that someone all them years later has come out and says, actually, this is why he was killed. And it's like, the end result, he still was killed. There's no defense. What are you doing? So I just find it just exhausting that there's people out there that will defend these kind of crimes. It always exhausts me. It genuinely does. That there's always someone who finds an excuse, and it's like, how? Because my thought is, how would I feel? So for them people not to do that introspective look and like, how would I feel if that was me, or that it happened? So I don't get it. I don't understand. But and they're the ones that get paid the big bucks. But yes, that was the Matthew Shepard story. Thank you so much for joining me again. Bit of a long one. But yeah, like I say, I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas and Happy New Year. And let's just hope this is a better year than last one. Although, we're all here. As long as you're here and you're healthy, we'll catch up on this time. We will. I suppose creates a stronger bond in your family. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you. Take care.